I've always heard that dirt roads in the countryside hide more secrets than the forests surrounding them. At first, I thought it was just stories people made up to pass the time. You know how it is. Small towns, not much going on, any little thing turns into a legend. But after that night, my perspective on those stories changed forever. It was the fall of 2017. I was driving back from a visit to my parents' house, who lived on a remote farm, about 30 miles from the nearest town. I used to take that route frequently, especially at night when the truck traffic on the main road was lighter. That dirt road, which crossed a small stream and was surrounded by thick trees, was my usual path, although many avoided it after dark. They spoke of inexplicable accidents and disappearances over the years, but I had never seen anything to support those claims. That night, the temperature felt colder than usual, and fog began to settle heavily, forcing me to drive with extra caution. The car's radio started picking up interference, crackling every few minutes, but I didn't pay much attention. The silence of that deserted road was worse than the distorted sound. As I moved forward, a sense that something was wrong began to form inside me. The fog was so dense that I could barely see a few feet ahead. I had taken that route hundreds of times, but at that moment, it felt completely different, as if something about the road had changed. Then I saw a figure in the middle of the road. The figure had its back to me, standing perfectly still, as if waiting for something. I slowed down, thinking it might be someone in trouble, perhaps needing help. When the headlights illuminated the person, I realized it was a woman, wearing a long white dress that dragged along the dirt. Her hair, black as the night, covered her face in a strange way, almost as if she were hiding something. I stopped the car a few meters away, feeling a slight apprehension. She didn't move. I didn't turn around immediately, but a wave of discomfort started to build inside me. Her presence, so out of place on that road, felt unreal. I rolled down the window slowly and asked if she was okay. No response. The woman remained still, her back slightly hunched in an unnatural way. I looked around, trying to figure out where she might have come from, but all I could see was the empty road and the distant forest. For a few seconds, I thought about reversing and leaving, but something stopped me. A mix of curiosity and fear kept me frozen in place. I decided to step out of the car. As I opened the door, the cold night air hit me with a force I had never felt before. There was something wrong with that wind, like it was coming from some dark place. I took a few steps toward the woman, calling out to her again. When I was just a few feet away, she finally moved. Slowly, she turned her head in my direction. What I saw froze me to my core. Her face, there was no face. It was as if the skin had been stretched over her head, with no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just emptiness. She tilted her head to the side, as if she were observing me, though she had no eyes. I felt a pressure in my chest, like the air around me was being drained. My feet seemed glued to the ground, unable to move. For a moment, I thought it was some kind of illusion. I was tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, she started to move toward me. Every step she took in my direction seemed to drag time itself with it. The sound of her dress scraping against the ground was the only thing I could hear, a macabre soundtrack to that seemingly endless moment. I tried to run, but my feet were stuck to the ground, as if something invisible held me in place. And when she was less than a meter away, something impossible happened. She opened her mouth. Not a normal mouth, but a grotesque opening that formed in the middle of that featureless face, ripping the skin violently. A scream came from it, a sound that didn't seem of this world, a scream that made the air around me vibrate. I felt my legs give out, collapsing to my knees, powerless. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would explode. The sound, that scream, didn't stop, echoing inside my head. I covered my ears, but it was useless. The woman was now just inches away from me. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in my car, the engine still running, parked in the middle of the road. I looked around, disoriented, trying to understand what had happened. The figure of the woman was gone. The road was empty again, as if nothing had happened. But the cold remained, piercing, almost like a reminder of what I had witnessed. My arms were trembling so much that I needed a few minutes before I could grip the steering wheel firmly. I turned on the high beams, trying to illuminate as much of the road ahead as possible. And then I sped off. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself that it had all been just a hallucination. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe something I ate. But every time I close my eyes, the image of that faceless woman haunts me. I haven't been able to return to that road. Somehow, I knew that what I saw, that woman, wasn't from this world. Others who live in that region say they've heard similar stories of a woman on the road at night, but no one knows who or what she really is. One thing is for sure. I will never again underestimate the stories people tell about country roads. Some of them are more real than we'd like to believe. It all started in late October, in 2004. The house I bought with my wife, Mariana, was located on the outskirts of a small town in the countryside. It was an old property, built in the 1920s, with large wooden windows and a classic colonial style that immediately charmed us. The purchase was a real bargain. For a low price, we acquired a house with over 4,000 square feet, including a large basement that the real estate agent barely mentioned. They said something vague about the structure being in good condition, but recommended not using the space. We weren't worried at the time. In the first week, while organizing things, I found the basement entrance. It was a reinforced wooden door hidden behind some old boxes the previous owner had left behind. When I opened it, the smell of mold hit the air. A stone staircase led down into complete darkness. There was a heavy feeling in that place, but since I'd always been skeptical about anything supernatural, I ignored the sensation. Mariana, however, was uncomfortable with the basement from the start. She said she felt a presence down there, something she couldn't explain. "It's just your imagination," I'd say, trying to reassure her. Old houses always have a different atmosphere. She nodded but wasn't convinced. And in a way, neither was I. Something about that space disturbed me, even though I didn't want to admit it. On the third night, while we were sleeping, I was awakened by a sound. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the noise of something scratching wood. I looked at the clock. 3:15 a.m. Mariana was still fast asleep beside me, so I got up to check the house. I walked through the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway that led to the basement. That's when the sound grew louder, as if it were coming from under the stairs. I went down to the basement, armed with a flashlight, trying to control the growing unease. The light flickered against the stone walls as I searched every corner of the space. Nothing. Just old boxes, dusty furniture, and complete silence. Probably rats, I thought, before heading back up to try to sleep again. The next night, the sound returned. This time, it was louder and more constant. It sounded like someone dragging something across the floor. Mariana woke up this time, her eyes wide with fear. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I grabbed the flashlight and went back down to the basement, hoping to find a logical explanation. But when I got there, something was different. The boxes that had been piled in the back of the basement had been moved. They were now scattered across the floor, some tipped over as if they had been thrown with force. I looked around, searching for signs of an intruder, but there was nothing to suggest someone had entered the house. The air down there was colder than in the rest of the house, almost freezing, and the smell of mold was stronger, nearly unbearable. When I went back upstairs to tell Mariana what I had seen, she was pale, her face covered in sweat. "There's something in this house," she said, her voice trembling. "I know you don't believe in this kind of thing, but I feel like there's someone watching us all the time." I didn't know how to respond. Mariana's behavior deteriorated in the following days. She started having nightmares every night, waking up at 3:15 a.m., panting, her eyes wide with fear. She said she saw a shadow in the corner of the room, a tall, shapeless figure that watched her silently. I tried to calm her down, saying they were just dreams, but the truth was that I, too, had started feeling something strange in the house. The basement, in particular, seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't explain. One day, after yet another sleepless night, I decided enough was enough. I resolved to investigate the history of the house, hoping to find a logical explanation for what was happening. I went to the town hall and requested the property records. What I found left me unsettled. The house had belonged to a farming family for decades. However, in 1963, the youngest daughter, a girl named Cecilia, aged 12, mysteriously disappeared. According to the reports, she was last seen playing near the basement. After weeks of fruitless searches, the family moved away, and the house remained abandoned for years until it was sold several times, with the new owners always claiming to feel strange presences. The story didn't end there. What shocked me the most was discovering that in each of the recorded transactions, there was mention of strange incidents related to the basement. Cecilia's disappearance was never resolved, and although authorities had conducted extensive searches at the time, nothing was found. I went home with this information in my head, unsure how to tell Mariana. When I arrived, I found her sitting on the couch, staring intently at the basement door. "She's down there," she said, her voice low and trembling. "The girl." I heard her voice, asking for help. My whole body went cold. I had never seen my wife in that state, so fragile, so terrified. I decided we needed to leave the house, but first, something inside me told me I had to go down to the basement one last time, to make sure there was nothing down there. I grabbed a shovel and a flashlight, determined to dig until I found whatever was hidden in that damn basement. Mariana begged me not to do it, but something in me was already set. I went down the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of the air around me. The basement felt colder than before, as if the space itself was alive, breathing around me. I started digging in the dirt floor, in the far end of the basement, where the boxes had been repeatedly moved. The sound of the shovel cutting into the ground echoed off the stone walls, creating an even more claustrophobic atmosphere. After a few minutes of digging, the shovel hit something hard. My heart raced. I kept digging with my hands, removing the dirt until something began to emerge. It was a box made of old rotting wood, buried just over a foot deep. When I opened it, the smell of death hit me like a punch. Inside the box were human remains. Small fragments of bones, which I immediately recognized as belonging to a child. The sight made me stagger backward. Before I could process what I was seeing, I felt something behind me. A presence. A shadow. When I turned, the flashlight illuminated a figure. It was Cecilia, or what was left of her. Her face was distorted, pale, with sunken eyes watching me with an expression of eternal suffering. She said nothing. She just looked at me, and in that moment I knew she had been trapped there, in that basement, for decades.